My daughter uninvited me to her wedding because I didn't support her decision to drop out of school, to marry a loser. But let's see how she's going to pay for the wedding. Without my credit card. I'm a 55-year-old single father of a 19-year-old daughter who seems determined to make every bad decision possible. I thought I'd done my part by raising her to be smart, careful and independent. But apparently none of that has stuck. Here I am, watching her ruin her life and mine by marrying a walking red flag. Maybe this is one of those tough love stories. But honestly, I'm at my limit. My daughter Meg has all the potential in the world, but no intention of using it. She wanted to take 2 years off from school. In her words, to find herself. She's always been average academically, but she loves sport. We've supported her in everything she's wanted to do. Football, baseball, you name it. But when she said she wanted to take A from high school, we told her no. Obviously she felt overwhelmed by the workload. We felt that not all children progress at the same rate. But the solution was not to drop out, but to put in more. Work harder or find help to get more organized. Those years turned out to be the hardest of my life. At first she said she was going to concentrate more on her studies. And I even got her tutors. I hoped she'd spend more time with her books. But the only extra time she spent was with the tutors. No extra effort. The rest of her day was filled with television, hanging out with the wrong crowd, and throwing tantrums whenever she was reprimanded. She would even sneak out after I went to bed. Once she stole my car and tried to leave town. But a traffic warden stopped her just in time. I did everything I could to get her back on track. She's been in and out of therapy for years. It took countless late-night talks and endless counseling sessions to convince her to make a real effort at school and finish her education. I thought we had turned a corner, that she was finally ready to get her life together. But that's when the real problems started. Not that there hadn't been some before, but this is where things really spiraled out of control. Shortly after giving school another chance, Meg met a guy called Tyler. He's 26 and works as a bakery assistant. He delivers pastries to her school canteen. I don't mind his job. An honest day's work is an honest day's work. But Tyler has no direction. No plans, no real goals. Just a let's see what happens attitude. Worse, he's a serial dater. He was once married at 21 to a girl who was 20. They separated within 6 months after they realized it wasn't working. And now my daughter is head over heels in love. Apparently. He dated one of Meg's classmates until he met Meg. Meg and they struck up a relationship. The rest, as they say, is history. It was still nice and respectful when it was just casual dating. But recently she dropped the bombshell. They were getting married. At first I thought she was messing with me. Sometimes I meddle too much, asking for details about their relationship. Understand this. I'm a single dad raising a rebellious teenager. I also thought she was trying to manipulate me for something. But when she told me the details, I was completely blindsided. They've already set a date for next month. She's serious. I was completely shocked by her decision. She kept saying they were soulmates and that age didn't matter. As far as I know, her classmate was his soulmate too. But according to her, none of that matters. She's blinded by the idea of romance and can't see the reality in front of her. She's 19, he's 26. She hasn't finished high and has no plans for her future with her rebellious phase. She has lost some time and still hasn't graduated. He hasn't even finished middle school and doesn't have a real job. He works as a delivery boy in his parents' bakery. And here they are planning a wedding. I asked her if I could have a say in it. She said I'm only allowed to smile. Smile and politely give them away if I want to go to the wedding. She even said I should feel lucky to have been told about the wedding. Some of her friends didn't even tell their parents. Until after it was over. I don't know what kind of friends they are. But they're not the kind of friends you should be taking advice from. I asked if he even had a house. And she said he lives in a studio flat, but plans to move into a one-bedroom. I told her, we live in a 3-bedroom house with a walk-in wardrobe. Do you think you can live in a studio? She replied angrily, why not? I hang out there all the time, why can't I live there? Do you even have an answer to that? At that point I'd had enough. Hanging out and living there are two completely different things. I tried to reason with her, saying she still has to finish school, still living with me and living off my credit card. How in the world is she going to adapt to a new life without education? No job, no money. She wasn't in the mood to listen. She said she's getting married whether I like it or not, even if it meant going to court. Desperate, I told her I wanted to meet the guy first. She agreed to meet me this weekend. Honestly, I'm terrified. I don't know what to say. She tells me she's an adult and can do whatever she wants. Legally, yes. But 19 is not the right age to get married. At least not in our culture. I immediately called Meg's mother. A person who simply doesn't care about her daughter. She's too busy in her own world. Meg's mother and I divorced 8 years ago, and became co-parents. She remarried shortly afterwards. This didn't sit well with Meg. Their relationship became strained when, year into her new marriage, she had a baby girl. Meg felt insecure and neglected after the baby's arrival. A year later she gave birth to twins. Since then she hasn't had time for Meg. As for me, I haven't dated anyone all this time. Between working to make money and being a full-time dad, I didn't see the point. What am I going to do? I'm at my wit's end. I never took anything beyond a few dates. I knew she couldn't handle it. I became her support system, her constant pillar, while her mother was too busy raising her 3 children. But in the last few years, especially after she dropped out of high school, I noticed that Meg was bonding with her mom. At first it was a relief, until I realized that my ex was playing the role of good cop to make up for her absence and stay on Meg's good side. She blindly supported Meg's decisions while I became the nagging parent. Suddenly Meg's mom became her favorite, even though Meg hardly spent any time at her house. I thought maybe if her mom sat her down and talked to her, would knock some sense into her. After all, Meg now saw her mom as the cool mom. So I contacted my ex-wife. She agreed to talk to Meg, but she didn't do it with any real interest. She said if they're in love, we should support them. I was stunned. Support them? Support a marriage between a girl who hasn't finished high school and a man who has with no real job. Not even a plan. We both knew that Meg wasn't ready. But her mother just didn't want to deal with the conflict, and sugarcoated everything. Their talks solved nothing. Except this. She offered to help Meg plan the wedding. Now I'm conflicted. Well, not really. I know what I want. I don't want this wedding to happen. But how do I stop it? Can I get some advice on how to deal with this? Things have gone completely off the rails. But I'll get to that later. It all started when I decided to call in reinforcements. My mother, Meg's grandmother. She's always been a sharp and practical woman. A firm and straightforward lady in her 70s who isn't afraid to tell it like it is. Things as they are. She agreed to come and talk to Meg. I organized a family meeting, in the hope that her own grandmother would get through to her. When Grandma sat down with Meg, she didn't hold back. Marriage isn't just about love. It's about commitment and responsibility and planning. What have you and Tyler planned for the future? Have you thought about finances, income, family planning? Do you have an emergency fund? Do you even earn enough to keep a roof over your heads? Meg sat uncomfortably, but Grandma didn't stop. She even shared stories of her own struggles. How hard it was for her to balance family and finances. Hoping that Meg would That love alone wasn't enough. But Meg just folded her arms and gave the same answer she had given me. Times have changed, don't you understand? I know what I'm doing. Of course, it was like talking to a wall. One where the paint wasn't even dry. My mother was frustrated, and as she left she said to me, "She has to learn the hard way." That was all that was left. I decided to meet Tyler face to face and see what he was made of. What he was made of. We sat down in a restaurant. And I asked him the big question. "What are your plans for the future?" He shrugged his shoulders and said, "We'll figure it out as we go along. Love is more important than money." I wanted to punch him. It took all my self-control not to lose my temper. I tried to explain that marriage isn't just about love. It's about building a stable life together. I wanted to give him to prove to me that he had a plan. That he could look after my daughter. But he just sat there, nodding as if he was listening. When it was clear that he wasn't, I suggested that they date for a few more years. And if everything went well, then they could get married. I even went so far as to suggest that they live together for a few months before taking the plunge. But none of my suggestions seemed like good options to them. Tyler mentioned that even his parents had doubts about the marriage. That gave me a ray of hope. Perhaps if I spoke to them, we could stop this disaster together. I invited his parents to dinner the next night. When they arrived, I noticed that they were very modest, hard-working people. And they shared my concern for our children. They also thought this marriage was a bad idea. I realized that they were in the same situation that I was in. After they left, Meg lashed out at me. She said I had let her down by expressing my concerns about their marriage. I told her that I was just discussing things. But she was in her own world. She accused me of trying to ruin her life. And said she wouldn't let me. She got so angry that she banned me from the wedding. "If you can't support me, you'd better stay out of it." She said. I stopped her and asked her if she could hear herself. She replied, "Of course I do. I don't want a grumpy, sad face ruining my special day." I asked, "You don't mean that, do you?" She made it clear that she did mean it. And that I was not welcome at her wedding because I wasn't supportive. She locked herself in her room and said she didn't want to be the negative energy of someone who didn't believe in her happiness. I was heartbroken. It felt like a knife in my chest. But I had no choice but to accept it. She didn't want me there, so I wouldn't go. But I wasn't going to finance a wedding where I wasn't welcome. I froze the credit card. If she'd to organize a wedding with my money, she'd have to think again. Why should I pay for a wedding from which I'm excluded? Within hours she called me furious. She screamed that I had ruined everything. She accused me of being selfish and trying to control her life. Trying to control her life. I told her calmly that if she wanted to make adult choices, she would have to deal with the adult consequences. She ran to her mother and asked for financial help. Meg really thought that her mother, a housewife with 3 children, whose husband is the sole breadwinner, would pay for her wedding. Well, she was wrong. Her mother shed a few helpless tears and turned her down. Meg had already burned her last bridge with her grandmother. My mother is the last person who would finance this absurd wedding. I don't know what she'll do now. But my gut tells me they're going to get married. Even if it's only in the courthouse. Disaster seems inevitable. She doesn't speak to me. And we avoid each other in the house. As the wedding date approaches, I feel worse about it all. It's only a matter of days before she leaves the house. The day will come. But I don't want to say goodbye to her. In this situation, no parent wants their child to leave home without talking to them. Without talking to them. I really appreciate all the comments and I have received from other parents and even some mums. Sorry for taking so long to update, but here goes. As I predicted, Meg got married against all odds. And things don't look good for her. After I cut off her financial support, she wasn't about to let a frozen credit card stop her. She and Tyler went to the bank and took out a loan to finance their wedding. She rubbed it in my face and said, "You think you can stop the wedding by freezing your stupid card? The wedding is going ahead as planned, whether you like it or not." I told her okay and let it happen. There wasn't much else to do at that point. They are both adults. And if they don't want to take my advice, or anyone else's for that matter, then they'll have to learn their lesson the hard way. They borrowed thousands of dollars. They had the venue, the flowers, the catering, and even a small live band. Tyler's family weren't thrilled either, but they attended and looked miserable the whole time. Her dad made a video call to me during the ceremony. Meg's friends pitched in where they could, even though they didn't think it was a good idea either. Some of her close friends even tried to reason with her, but she brushed them off. She was convinced they were jealous of her happiness. And no, they weren't the same ones. Friends who got married without telling their parents. In case you're wondering, she isolated herself from everyone who cared about her, all to hold on to the illusion of a perfect wedding. One of her childhood friends, who is also our neighbor, called me after the wedding to tell me the details. She said, "Don't you know what's going on with her? It's like she's living in a fantasy world." It hurt. I felt pathetic for being excluded. Yes, I had been against the wedding from the start, but I never wanted to miss it. As the father of a daughter, the most honorable and precious moment in life is to walk her down the aisle. But Meg robbed me of that honor. As she was leaving the house, I left a note in her room, wishing her all the best for her future. That's all you can wish for your children. I don't approve of what she's done, but I can't wish her ill in life either. As you can imagine, it's been 2 months since the wedding, and things are already starting to fall apart. Last week, Tyler showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, like a man who had aged a decade in just a few months. I hesitated to let him in, but did so anyway. He avoided the main reason for his visit, but it was clear that he was struggling financially. He told me that he had taken on another job, in addition to working in his parents' bakery. Meg was also interviewing for various jobs, but you can imagine the type of positions available for someone who dropped out of school. Yes, Meg didn't finish school in the end, even though she only had a few subjects left. And Meg must have been quite demanding on top of that. Then it came to the point. Their income wasn't enough to make ends meet. Apparently they were behind on their loan payments, rent and utility bills. He told me they were drowning in debt, and asked me if I could help them, just until they could get back on their feet. I looked at him, and remembered how he once said that love was more important than money. I told him no, I'm sorry, I can't help. If my daughter is so proud that she doesn't want me in her life, why should I care? Besides, if love is more important than money, you should be in the bank right now and offer your love to the bank manager. I can't guarantee they'll accept it, and they might even call the police if you offer your love the way you do. But at least you can try to see if they accept your reasoning. I told him they would have to find out for themselves, just as he had said in the beginning. He looked as if I had hit him, but I didn't budge. He left with his shoulders slumped. That night Meg rang angrily, screaming, "You humiliated him. He came to you in good faith, and you threw it in his face. I thought you'd support me, but instead, you emasculated him by reminding him that we have no money." She said I replied that you wanted me out of your life. And in case you didn't know, this is exactly what it means to be out of your life. She called me a terrible father for not wanting to help her to start her life with the men she loves. I said you knew he didn't earn much. How could you? How could you expect me to live the same lifestyle as before? Your answer shocked me, and it will shock you too. I thought I still had your card, but you've taken it away. Wow, so Meg doesn't want me or my advice. But she wants my card. Unbelievable. I said, you know what? You deserve every bit of the hardship you are facing. Maybe I have been overprotective and given you more than was necessary. Let that be a lesson. She shouted something, but I hung up. The conflict didn't end there. Her mother was furious with me for making Meg suffer, and accused me of ruining Meg's chance of a happy life. A happy life. But there was nothing her mother could say to me, especially as she was also partly responsible for the decision Meg had made. Deep down, I knew that Meg would have to hit rock bottom to understand. It hurts to know that she's struggling, but she has to face it. She has to learn gratitude and humility. Lessons that only hard times can teach. The lessons I couldn't teach her. Maybe her bad choices will. Still, as a father, I can't deny that I hope she can overcome this. Learn something valuable and grow from this ordeal. But beyond that, there's nothing I can do. Because any attempt to help would only make things worse. I know there's a chance she'll, for the rest of her life, but helping her now would only reinforce those mistakes. In the end, it would just prolong this situation, and she wouldn't learn anything. A month ago, Meg sent me a panic text. It was almost midnight and I was sleeping. But her messages woke me up, as they came one after the other. Her messages were cryptic and I could barely understand them. But she was terrified. I thought maybe something had happened. An accident involving her or Tyler. I called her immediately. After much hesitation, she told me she thought she might be pregnant. She was scared and had no idea how she could afford a baby on top of her already out of control finances. She sobbed, "What am I going to do?" She called me from the bathroom while Tyler slept in the bedroom. Sleeping in the bedroom. I didn't want to scare him. I wanted to say, "This is what you chose." But the father in me couldn't be that cold. I told her that if it came to that, they could find a way to deal with it. But I also made it clear that I was not going to pay for her mistakes or give her money in any way. I asked her to make absolutely sure before telling Tyler the news. I made an appointment for her to see a doctor the next day. The doctor asked her to wait a week for confirmation. Meg lost her mind in the meantime. She asked me to recommend Tyler to my network of contacts or hire him in my office. You see, I run a small agency. My staff are trained professionals. And Tyler has no real skills or the judgment to learn any. How could I recommend or employ him? I delayed the decision by saying, "Let's wait for confirmation." But she insisted I do it now. When I didn't, I had to face her accusations. "You're a capitalist and all that nonsense." Fortunately for her, it turned out to be a false alarm. She wasn't pregnant. Unfortunately for her, the false alarm wasn't enough to teach her a lesson. Instead, it seemed to harden her resolve. She grew colder and more distant. Because I didn't hire Tyler. Some of you may think it was cruel of me not to hire him. Not to hire him, as my daughter and ex-wife believe. But honestly, I think I did the right thing. She blurted out in one of our conversations. "Why are you so resistant? After all, everything will pass to me as your heir in the end." I told her no, not necessarily. I could spend all the money, retire early or travel. Who knows? I might get married again and need the money for all that. After seeing her narcissism, I honestly feel I'd rather leave it all to charity than to her. Why should I? She didn't listen to me. Excluded me from the wedding. She has never apologized and doesn't keep in touch. And when I try to talk to her, she throws everything I ever did wrong in my face. It breaks my heart. But sending her money would only make it worse. I know it's not easy being a parent and trying to teach a life lesson. But right now I have to be stronger. Right now. I feel like I've lost my daughter to her own pride. I'm just a father sitting here, watching her stumble through the worst choices of her life. Maybe just maybe, one day, she'll realize I was just trying to protect her. Until then, I'll be here waiting, hoping that one day she will swallow her pride and see me for the father I am, and come back without asking for money. But with each passing day, that possibility seems more distant. How are you? I hope you're all well. After these 2 years without contact, I have missed sharing things with you, but there was nothing important to share. Until recently. Before I start, I want to tell you that I've been seeing someone for the last few months. It's a pretty serious relationship at this point, although we haven't reached the stage where we are thinking about moving together or getting married. But I wanted to mention it. I know some of you have been worried or advised me to start dating someone now that I no longer have to be a full-time parent to my daughter. I have all the time in the world to focus on myself. Regarding Meg, my daughter. First of all, let me tell you what our relationship was like during this time. Or rather, the lack of a relationship. We've had quite distant contact. We called each other for important events. But our relationship was never the same. On several occasions, Meg has asked me for money, or tried to get me to pay for things for her, but I always said no. This led to fights that ended in long periods without speaking to each other. However, in the last few months she stopped asking me for money. I saw this as a small improvement. Not in our relationship, but at least in her outlook on life. Because even though she and Tyler were barely surviving, at least they were doing it on their own. As far as I know, they've managed to do that without anyone else's help. That was a positive development in a way. But that all changed about a month ago. I wish I could have written earlier. But my girlfriend and I decided to take a 2-week holiday. We got back a week ago. And between preparing for the trip and getting back into my routine, I haven't had time to sit down and write to you. Here's what happened. Meg is divorcing Tyler. All I know is that the relationship has become toxic. Meg told me that she and Tyler, with Tyler about their finances and other little things. Little things. The arguments escalated to the point where it was clear that they couldn't live together anymore. Meg realized that Tyler wasn't the man she thought he was, and admitted that she'd made a mistake marrying him. She did mention something about infidelity, but I didn't ask too many questions about it. You'd think that would be a moment of reconciliation. But that's not what happened. The truth is that she blames me for everything that has happened. If I had supported her and helped her financially, maybe they would have had a better chance of succeeding. So our relationship is still at a dead end. I refuse to take responsibility for the choices she has made. And she refuses to see that her actions led to the outcome she's now facing. It's a difficult situation. As a father, it's hard to see your child suffer. But I know I did what I thought was right. Life is the best teacher, and I can only hope that she learns from this. For now, I'm going to continue to focus on myself and my relationship with my girlfriend. I will also keep the door open for Meg, but I won't enable her to make bad choices. Maybe one day things will get better. But until then, I have to get on with my life. Thank you for reading, and for your continued support on this journey.